The dust-laden air of Elthar carried the faint, metallic scent of machinery and the ever-present grit of sand. 6 months since humanity had established the mining outpost, and Cale Moreno still couldn't get used to the way the planet seemed determined to infiltrate every crevice of his existence. The fine particles worked their way into the air conditioning systems he maintained, into the seals of his quarters, even into the solitary meals he ate in the company commissary. Tonight, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting their pale blue glow across the vast desert landscape, Cale sat alone in the pink sandbar, nursing a glass of what the locals called skivak, a potent spirit distilled from desert cacti. It burned his throat on the way down, but it helped numb the loneliness that had become his constant companion. The bar was unusually crowded. The seasonal sandstorm was due to hit in the next few days, and both humans and Eltharians were seeking shelter and companionship before being confined to their dwellings for the duration. Kyle had no interest in mingling. He had learned early in his posting to maintain distance from the locals. Less complicated that way. Cale's eyes drifted to the viewport that dominated one wall of the establishment. The desert stretched endlessly, punctuated by the angular silhouettes of the mining installations. Somewhere out there beneath the sands lay the rare minerals that had brought humanity to this harsh world. Not that Cale cared much about the politics or economics of the operation. His job was simple: keep the environmental systems running so that people could breathe and not roast alive under the 3 suns that punished Elthar during daylight hours. A commotion from the back of the bar drew his attention. A boisterous group of Eltharians had gathered around a game table. Their elongated limbs and iridescent skin marked them as members of the aristocracy, the tribal leaders who had negotiated the mining treaties with the Earth corporations. Cale recognized their leader, Lord Jar, whose elaborate headpiece and ancestral markings designated his status among his people. The noise level increased as Jar grew more animated, his gestures becoming wild and erratic. Even from a distance, Cale could tell the nobleman was thoroughly intoxicated. The universal language of drunkenness transcended species barriers. Cale turned back to his drink. Not his problem. Nothing on this planet was his problem beyond the environmental systems. 6 more months, and his contract would be complete. He'd collect his hazard pay and transfer to a more hospitable assignment, perhaps, on one of the terraformed moons of Jupiter. Somewhere with fewer complications. His solitude was interrupted by the crash of breaking glass. Lord Jar had risen from his seat, knocking over his drink in the process. The nobleman swayed unsteadily, his voice raised in what sounded like a proclamation. The translator implant in Cale's ear converted the alien language to English, with a slight delay. "And I, Lord Jar of the ancient house of Elthar, hereby pledge my 3 daughters as payment for my debt." A murmur rippled through the bar. Even the human patrons looked up from their drinks, sensing the significance of the moment. Cale's brow furrowed. He had enough knowledge of local customs to understand that such proclamations held legal weight among the Eltharians. Their society operated on a complex system of honor bonds and familial responsibilities that dated back millennia. The gambling partner, a shrewd-looking Eltharian with the markings of the Siraval clan, smiled coolly. "I accept your pledge, Lord Jar. Your daughters will make fine additions to my household staff." Jar's face contorted in what Cale recognized as the Eltharian expression of distress. "No, not as servants. As wards. Protected wards. According to the ancient laws." The Siraval leader's expression hardened. "I have no need for wards, Jar. Your debt is substantial. I require workers, not responsibilities." "Then I shall find another to take them," Jar declared, his voice carrying across the now silent bar. "Who among you will accept guardianship of the daughters of House Jar III, beautiful accomplished princesses of royal blood? A temporary arrangement until my fortunes are restored." Silence greeted his plea. The Eltharians averted their eyes, a clear sign of rejection in their culture. The humans in the bar looked confused or embarrassed by the spectacle. Jar stumbled through the crowd, his desperation growing with each step. "Will no one honor the ancient laws of protection? Will no one save my house from disgrace? Kale sank lower in his seat, hoping to avoid notice. But fate had other plans. Jar's unsteady gait brought him directly to Kale's table. The nobleman's multifaceted eyes focused on him with surprising clarity. You off-worlder. You understand honor. Yes, you will accept guardianship of my daughters. Before Kale could protest, Jar had grasped his hand and pressed a small crystal disc into his palm. It is done. The bond is sealed. The bar erupted in a mixture of gasps and nervous laughter. The Siraval leader's face darkened with anger. Several Eltharian elders, who had been quietly observing from a corner booth, now approached, their expressions grave. What just happened? Kyle asked, looking from the disc in his hand to the faces surrounding him. An elderly Eltharian with the markings of a tribal judge answered, Lord Jar has invoked the sacred law of guardianship. He has transferred protection rights of his 3 daughters to you off-worlder. He can't do that, Kale protested. I'm not even a citizen of your world. Your laws don't apply to me. You reside on Elthar soil. You breathe Elthar air. You drink Elthar spirits, the elder replied, gesturing to Kale's glass. By treaty law, you are subject to our customs while you remain here. This is ridiculous, Kale said, rising from his seat. I didn't agree to this. I have no interest in being anyone's guardian. Take this back. He tried to hand the crystal disc to Jar, but the nobleman had collapsed into a nearby chair, apparently passed out from his exertions. The elder's voice hardened. The bond has been sealed in the presence of witnesses. To reject it now would be a grave insult to House Jar and to all Eltharian custom. Such an offense could be punishable by exile or death. Kale looked around the bar, hoping to find an ally, someone who might understand his predicament. The human patrons avoided his gaze, clearly not wanting to get involved in alien politics. The Eltharians watched with a mixture of fascination and solemnity. What exactly does this guardianship entail? Kale asked, finally realizing he might need to find a diplomatic way out of this situation. You will provide shelter, sustenance, and protection to the 3 daughters of House Jar, the elder explained. You will be responsible for their well-being and education until such time as Lord Jar reclaims his right of parentage, or until they choose to release you from the bond. And how long is that likely to be? The elder's face assumed the Eltharian equivalent of a shrug. That is between you and your ward's guardian Moreno. Kale felt a headache forming behind his eyes. This was exactly the kind of complication he had always strived to avoid. I live in a single occupancy quarters at the mining base. I work 12-hour shifts maintaining the environmental systems. I'm not equipped for guardianship of anyone, let alone 3 alien princesses. The daughters of House Jar are adaptable, the elder assured him. They will arrive at your dwelling tomorrow at first light. He bowed slightly. May the sands shift favorably beneath your feet, guardian. With that, the elders retreated, taking the unconscious Lord Jar with them. The bar slowly returned to its previous level of activity, though Kale noted that he was now the subject of curious glances from both humans and Eltharians. He downed the remainder of his drink in one gulp, welcoming the burn. 6 months until his contract ended. 6 months of being responsible for 3 alien women he had never met. 6 months of complication. As he paid his tab and headed for the exit, Kale felt the weight of the crystal disc in his pocket. He considered throwing it into the desert, pretending the whole incident had never happened. But something, perhaps a sense of honor, he hadn't realized he possessed, or simple self-preservation in the face of exile or death, made him keep it. The walk back to the mining base gave him time to contemplate his situation. The more he thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Surely, there would be a way to nullify this guardianship in the morning. The human administrators of the base would have to intervene. This was clearly beyond the scope of the treaty agreements. Kale's quarters were small, but functional, like everything else at the mining operation. A single room with a bed desk and basic amenities. A tiny bathroom. A kitchenette that he rarely used, preferring to eat at the commissary. not exactly fit for housing 3 additional people, let alone alien princesses, with presumably high standards. As he prepared for bed, Cale decided that this would be someone else's problem in the morning. The stress of the encounter had drained him, and he fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. The harsh buzzing of his door chime woke him before his alarm. Disoriented, Cale stumbled to the door, still wearing the shorts and tank top he slept in. He hit the access panel without thinking, and the door slid open to reveal 3 tall, elegant Eltharian women. They stood in the sterile corridor of the mining base, their iridescent skin catching the fluorescent lighting in a rainbow of colors. Each wore the traditional robes of Eltharian nobility, though Cale noted that the fabric seemed worn and the embroidery faded. Their elongated features were marked with the same ancestral patterns as Lord Jar, identifying them as members of his house. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward. Her bearing was proud, her multifaceted eyes a deep amber that seemed to evaluate Cale with military precision. "I am Neris, eldest daughter of House Jar. These are my sisters Lyra and Mira." She gestured to the women beside her. Lyra had a quieter presence, her eyes a serene blue that reminded Cale of Earth's oceans. She inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Mira, clearly the youngest, shifted impatiently from foot to foot, her bright green eyes darting around the corridor with undisguised curiosity. "We understand you are our new guardian," Neris continued, her translator rendering her words in crisp, formal English. "We have brought our essential belongings as instructed by the elders." Cale stared at the 3 women, then at the modest travel cases at their feet. This was actually happening. The absurdity of the situation hit him anew. "Look, there's been a mistake," he began. "Your father was drunk. He made a rash decision. I'm sure we can sort this out if we go to the elders together and explain." "There is nothing to explain," Neris interrupted. "The guardianship bond has been sealed. We are now under your protection until our father reclaims his right, or until we choose to release you." "And when might that be?" Cale asked. The 3 sisters exchanged glances. "Our father's difficulties with gambling and drinking are not new," Lyra said, her voice soft but clear. "It may be some time before he is in a position to reclaim us. As for releasing you," Neris added, "that would require us to find another suitable guardian. Given the circumstances of our transfer, that may prove challenging." Cale ran a hand through his sleep-mussed hair. "So I'm stuck with you." "As we are stuck with you," Neris replied coolly. "The arrangement is not ideal for any of us, Guardian Moreno." "Just Cale. Please." He sighed, looking past them at the few curious base personnel who had stopped to observe the unusual scene. "You'd better come inside." The 3 women entered his quarters, their tall frames and flowing robes immediately making the space seem cramped. Mira began exploring immediately, picking up the few personal items Cale had displayed and examining them with unabashed interest. "Mira, show some decorum," Neris chided. "It's fine," Cale said, though he gently reclaimed a photo of his family from the young woman's hands. "But I need to make something clear. This space is obviously not suitable for 4 people. I'll talk to the base administrators about finding alternative arrangements. In the meantime, we need to establish some ground rules." "We are familiar with the concept of rules," Lyra said, settling gracefully onto the room's only chair. "House Jar has many traditions and protocols." "I'm sure it does," Cale replied. "But this isn't a noble house, it's a mining operation. Things work differently here." "We understand that our presence complicates your life," Neris said, standing ramrod straight in the center of the room. "We do not wish to be a burden. We are prepared to contribute to your household in whatever way is appropriate." Cale noticed that despite their proud words, all 3 sisters looked tired and tense. There was something in their posture that suggested this wasn't the first time they had been forced to adapt to difficult circumstances. He felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly suppressed. "I have to report for my shift in an hour," he said. "Stay here until I return. Don't leave these quarters. Don't touch anything that looks important. I'll bring food from the commissary when I come back and hopefully news of alternative housing arrangements. We have brought provisions, Lyra said, indicating one of the travel cases. We will not inconvenience you further. Kyle nodded, then retreated to the bathroom to prepare for his shift. As he showered and dressed, he could hear the sisters conversing in their native language, the melodic sounds occasionally punctuated by what seemed like laughter from Mira. When he emerged, he found that they had somehow transformed his chaotic quarters into a semblance of order. His few possessions had been arranged neatly, and the sisters had organized their own belongings in a compact manner that took up minimal space. "We are accustomed to making do with limited resources," Neris explained, noting his surprise. "Right. Well, I'll be back later." Kale headed for the door, then paused. "Just to be clear, this guardianship thing, it's just about providing shelter and food, right? I'm not responsible for anything else." The sisters exchanged another of their meaningful glances. "The bond of guardianship is complex," Lyra said carefully. "It encompasses protection from all threats, guidance in matters of importance, and representation in tribal councils. But primarily, yes, shelter and sustenance," Neris added, perhaps sensing Kale's growing alarm. "Great. Food and shelter. I can handle that. See you in 12 hours. Kale escaped into the corridor, the door sliding shut behind him, with a hiss that sounded suspiciously like relief. His shift passed in a blur of routine maintenance and distracted thoughts. When he mentioned his unusual situation to his supervisor, the man had laughed it off as a cultural misunderstanding that would surely be resolved soon. The base administrator was less amused but equally unhelpful, citing the delicate nature of human-Eltharian relations and the importance of respecting local customs. "You're telling me I have to keep them?" Kale asked incredulously. "I'm telling you not to create a diplomatic incident," the administrator replied. "The mining operation depends on good relations with the tribal leaders. If they say you're a guardian now, then for the time being, you're a guardian." "Where am I supposed to put them? My quarters are barely big enough for one person." The administrator consulted her tablet. "There's a vacant family unit in Sector 7. It was reserved for the Geological Survey team, but they've delayed their arrival by at least 3 months. You can use it temporarily." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than cramming 4 people into a single room. Kyle collected the access codes and stopped by the commissary to gather enough food for 4 before heading back to his quarters. He found the sisters exactly as he had left them, though they had clearly used the time to fully settle in. Lyra was reading something on a thin, translucent device that Kale recognized as Eltharian technology. Neris appeared to be meditating, her eyes closed and her breathing measured. Mira was asleep on Kale's bed, curled up like a child. "I've arranged for larger accommodations," Kale announced. "We can move there now." Neris opened her eyes. "That is considerate of you, Guardian." "Kyle," he reminded her. "And it's not consideration, it's practicality." The sisters gathered their belongings efficiently, and Mira was gently roused from her slumber. They followed Kale through the winding corridors of the base, attracting curious stares from off-duty personnel. Eltharians were not uncommon on the base, but the sight of 3 noble daughters trailing after a maintenance engineer was unusual enough to warrant attention. The family unit in Sector 7 was a significant improvement over Kale's single quarters. It consisted of a common living area, a functional kitchen, and 3 separate bedrooms. The furnishings were standard issue and utilitarian, but there was space to move and breathe. "This will be more than adequate," Neris declared, inspecting the rooms with an appraising eye. "I call this one," Mira announced, darting into the largest of the bedrooms, before her sisters could object. "Mira, that is not appropriate," Lyra admonished. "The largest room should go to Guardian Kale." "It's fine," Kyle said wearily. "I don't care which room I get. They're all the same to me." He deposited the food containers on the kitchen counter and began unpacking them. The sisters watched with interest as he arranged the various Earth and Eltharian dishes. "You have brought food for us," Lyra observed. "That was not necessary, but it is appreciated." Part of the guardianship deal, right? Shelter and sustenance. Kyle gestured to the food. Help yourselves. The meal was a silent affair, each of them focused on the food, rather than conversation. Kyle observed the sisters surreptitiously. Despite their noble bearing, they ate with the efficiency of those accustomed to uncertainty. It reinforced his earlier impression that life in House Jar might not have been as privileged as their titles suggested. After eating, Kale retreated to his chosen bedroom, leaving the sisters to sort out the remaining 2 rooms between them. He sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the past 24 hours, finally catching up to him. He was now the guardian of 3 alien women, responsible for their well-being, in a culture he barely understood. It was exactly the kind of entanglement he had always avoided. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Yes." Lyra entered, carrying a small, ornate box. "Guardian Kale, we wish to express our gratitude for your acceptance of the bond, however reluctant it may have been." "I didn't have much choice," Kale pointed out. "Perhaps not," Lyra conceded. "But you have treated us with more respect than many would have under the circumstances." She held out the box. "This is a small token from House Jar. It is not valuable in the commercial sense, but it holds significance to our family." Kale took the box hesitantly. Inside was a flat piece of polished stone, etched with symbols he didn't recognize. "What is it?" "A memory stone," Lyra explained. "It records the history of our house going back many generations. We thought you should know something of the family you now represent." "Represent? What does that mean exactly?" "As our guardian, you speak for House Jar in tribal matters," Lyra said. "Your voice is our voice in the council." Kale set the stone back in its box carefully. "I'm an environmental engineer, not a politician. I don't know anything about tribal councils or representation." "I can instruct you in diplomatic protocols," Lyra offered. "It is my area of expertise." "And Neris can teach you combat techniques," added Mira, who had appeared silently in the doorway. "She's the best warrior in 3 districts." "I don't need combat techniques," Kale protested. Mira's expression turned serious, her usual playfulness vanishing. "You might." Clan Siraval was not pleased to lose the guardianship bond to an off-worlder. They have influence and resources. Kale looked from Mira to Lyra. "Are you saying they might try to, take you by force?" "It is not unheard of," Lyra said carefully. "Guardianship bonds are sometimes contested." "Contested how?" "Through legal challenges in the tribal council," Lyra explained. "Or through more direct means if the stakes are high enough." "And are the stakes high in this case?" Kale asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Our father's gambling debts to Clan Siraval are substantial," Lyra admitted. "And there are other factors at play." "Such as?" "Our mother was keeper of the sacred rings," Mira said, ignoring a warning look from Lyra. "Before she died, she passed the knowledge of the ring ceremony to us. Clan Siraval has coveted that knowledge for generations." "What are the sacred rings?" Kale asked. "That is not something we can discuss with outsiders," Neris said, joining her sisters at the doorway. Her expression was stern. "Mira has already said too much." "I'm hardly an outsider now, am I?" Kale countered. "If I'm going to be responsible for your safety, I need to know what I'm protecting you from." Neris considered this, then nodded curtly. "A fair point. But such matters are not discussed lightly or quickly. We will speak of it tomorrow, after we have all rested." Kale wanted to press for more information, but exhaustion was overtaking him. "Fine. Tomorrow, then." The sisters withdrew, leaving Kale alone with his thoughts and the mysterious memory stone. He placed the box on the nightstand and prepared for bed, his dreams filled with swirling sands and iridescent figures locked in battle. Morning came too soon, heralded by the artificial lighting of the base, cycling to its daytime intensity. Kale emerged from his room to find Neris already awake and engaged in what appeared to be a series of martial exercises in the common area. Her movements were fluid and precise, her focus absolute. She acknowledged his presence with a nod, but didn't interrupt her routine. Kyle watched for a moment, impressed despite himself by her discipline and skill. "You're good," he said when she finally came to a resting position. "I am adequate," Neris replied. "My training was interrupted when our house fell into disfavor." "What happened to your house?" Kale asked, moving to the kitchen area to prepare a simple breakfast. Neris followed her expression guarded. "Our father was not always as you saw him in the bar. Once he was a respected leader, a skilled negotiator who helped forge the initial treaties with your people. But after our mother's death, he changed. The gambling, the drinking, they became his escape from grief. And you three paid the price," Kale surmised. "We adapted," Neris said simply, "as we will adapt now." Lyra and Mira joined them, and the four shared a quiet breakfast. The domesticity of the scene struck Kale as surreal. 24 hours ago, he had been a solitary engineer, focused solely on his work and counting the days until his contract ended. Now, he was sharing a meal with 3 alien women who looked to him for protection. "So," he said, pushing his plate aside, "tell me about these sacred rings and why Clan Siraval wants them badly enough to potentially cause trouble." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Lyra spoke. "The sacred rings are not physical objects but energy formations, ancient technology from before the Great Drying, when Elthar was a world of oceans rather than deserts. They are defensive in nature, capable of creating barriers against threats." "What kind of threats?" Kale asked. "Originally, they protected against the volatile weather patterns during the planet's transition to desert," Lyra explained. "But they can also shield against more immediate dangers." "Like weapons," Neris added bluntly, "or those who would do harm to the ring-bearers." "And your mother was a ring-bearer." Kyle was trying to piece together the significance. "She was the last trained keeper," Lyra corrected. "The knowledge of how to activate the rings has been passed down through our maternal line for generations. Before she died, she conducted the sharing ceremony with the 3 of us. Each of us now carries a portion of the knowledge." "Which is why Clan Siraval wants all 3 of you," Kale realized. "They need all the pieces to make it work." "Precisely," Neris confirmed. "Alone, none of us can activate the rings. Together we can create a defense that has not been seen on Elthar for centuries." "And what does Clan Siraval want with this defense?" "Power," Mira said simply. "The rings could make them virtually untouchable, able to dictate terms to the other clans. Even to the off-worlders." Kale absorbed this information, understanding now why the sisters had been so cautious about revealing it. "So, I'm not just housing 3 displaced noblewomen. I'm guarding a potential superweapon." "The rings are defensive, not offensive," Lyra insisted. "They cannot be used to attack, only to protect. But in the right hands or the wrong ones, even a shield can change the balance of power," Kale pointed out. "Yes," Neris acknowledged. "That is why our guardianship is more complex than simply providing shelter and food." Kale leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. "What stops Clan Siraval from just taking you by force? I'm one engineer against whatever resources they can bring to bear." "The guardianship bond offers some protection," Lyra explained. "To violate it openly would bring dishonor to their clan. They would need to find a legitimate reason to challenge your guardianship or make it appear that you had violated your duties. So they'll be looking for any mistake I make," Kale concluded. "It is likely," Neris agreed. "Which is why you must learn to defend yourself and us both physically and politically." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Are you volunteering to teach me?" "It would be practical," Neris said with a hint of a smile. "Unless you have combat training I am unaware of." "Basic self-defense, standard procedure for off-world postings," Kale admitted. "But nothing like what you were doing this morning." "Then we begin today," Neris declared, "after your work shift. And I will instruct you in the diplomatic protocols of the Tribal Council," Lyra added. "You should be prepared to represent us formally. And I'll show you the secret ways through the settlement," Mira chimed in. "The passages the Siraval enforcers don't know about." Kale looked at the 3 sisters, their expressions earnest and determined. They were offering to help him help them, a circular dependency that was both logical and absurd. "All right," he agreed finally. "But I need to get to my shift now. Try to stay out of trouble while I'm gone." "We have survived this long, Guardian," Neris reminded him. "We can manage a few hours in your absence." Kale's workday was a frustrating series of minor emergencies: sand in the filtration systems, overheating coolant lines, malfunctioning humidity controls. The approaching sandstorm was already affecting the base's operations, and every department was on high alert. As he worked, Kale found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the three sisters and their revelation about the sacred rings. He had come to Elthar to escape complications, to put in his time and collect his pay. Now he was embroiled in alien politics and protecting an ancient technology he barely understood. When his shift finally ended, he was exhausted and irritable. All he wanted was a hot shower and sleep, not combat training with an Eltharian warrior princess. But he had made a commitment, and something told him that Neris was not the type to accept excuses. He returned to the family unit to find it transformed. The sisters had rearranged the furniture in the common area to create an open space in the center. Lyra sat cross-legged on a cushion in one corner, surrounded by her translucent reading devices. Mira was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Mira?" Kale asked as he set down his tool bag. "Gathering information," Neris replied cryptically. She stood in the center of the cleared space, wearing a form-fitting garment that resembled training attire. "Are you ready to begin?" "Not really," Kale admitted. "It's been a long day." "The enemies of House Jar will not care if you are tired," Neris pointed out. "They will strike when it benefits them most." "Are they really enemies?" Kale asked, removing his work jacket. "That seems a bit dramatic." "Clan Siraval has coveted the ring knowledge for generations," Neris said. "They have tried bribes, marriages, even assassination attempts against our line. What would you call them if not enemies?" "Point taken," Kale conceded. "So, what are you going to teach me? I'm not going to suddenly become a master warrior in a few lessons." "No," Neris agreed. "But I can show you techniques specific to defending against Eltharian attack styles. Our physiology gives us certain advantages and disadvantages that you should understand." For the next hour, Neris drilled Kale in basic defensive moves, adapted for human physiology versus Eltharian opponents. Despite his fatigue, Kale found himself fully engaged in the training. Neris was a demanding but effective instructor, breaking down complex movements into manageable components and demonstrating with a precision that spoke of years of practice. "You're a good teacher," Kale observed during a brief rest period. "I trained the house guards before our fortunes declined," Neris said. "Teaching is a responsibility I take seriously." She demonstrated a blocking technique again. "Your arms are shorter than an Eltharian's, but your muscle density is greater. Use that to your advantage." By the time they finished, Kale was drenched in sweat, but feeling oddly invigorated. There was satisfaction in learning something new, in feeling his body respond to the challenges Neris set for him. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked as they cleared the space. "If that is convenient," Neris replied, a note of approval in her voice. "And when do I get my diplomatic lessons?" Kale asked Lyra, who had observed the training session with quiet interest. "I believe you have absorbed enough new information for one day," Lyra said. "We will begin tomorrow after you have rested." As if on cue, the door slid open to admit Mira, her eyes bright with excitement. "You'll never guess what I heard in the market district." "Mira, what have you been doing?" Neris demanded. "Reconnaissance, like I said I would," Mira replied unrepentant. "And it's a good thing I did. Clan Siraval is planning something. Their enforcers were asking questions about the new guardian of House Jar, about you, Kale." "What kind of questions?" Kale asked, suddenly alert despite his fatigue. "About your work schedule, your habits, your living arrangements," Mira reported. "They're gathering information." "For what purpose?" Lyra asked, setting aside her reading. "They didn't say, obviously," Mira retorted. "But one of them mentioned the tribal council meeting in 3 days' time. They seemed very interested in whether the off-worlder would attend." The council meeting, Lyra murmured. Of course. It would be the perfect opportunity to challenge the guardianship bond publicly. On what grounds? Cale asked. They would need to show that you are unfit or unwilling to fulfill your duties as guardian, Lyra explained. Or that the bond was formed under duress or deception. Well, wasn't it? Cale pointed out. Your father was drunk and desperate. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. Those facts will not favor their case, Lyra assured him. The bond was sealed with the proper words and the crystal disc, witnessed by tribal elders. The circumstances might have been unusual, but the form was correct. So I need to attend this council meeting, Cale concluded, to show that I'm taking the guardianship seriously. Yes, Lyra confirmed. And you will need to be prepared to speak for House Jar with confidence and authority. Cale sighed. No pressure, then. Mira grinned. Don't worry. Lyra is the best diplomat in the settlement. By the time she's done with you, you'll be able to argue water rights with a desert lizard. Is that a common negotiation scenario here? Cale asked wryly. More than you'd think, Mira replied with a laugh. The next 2 days fell into a routine of sorts. Kyle would work his shift return to the family unit train, with Neris receive diplomatic instruction from Lyra, and listen to Mira's reports on the movements of Clan Siraval. In between, they shared meals and gradually began to learn about each other beyond their immediate circumstances. Cale discovered that Neris had once been betrothed to a warrior from another clan, a match broken when House Jar's fortunes declined. Lyra had studied at an off-world academy for a year, giving her a broader perspective on Eltharian society than most of her peers. Mira, despite her apparent youth, had been managing the household affairs since their mother's death, navigating the complex web of debts and obligations that their father accumulated. In turn, he shared stories of Earth, of his family's agricultural commune, in the recovered zones of what had once been the American Midwest, of his decision to pursue engineering as a means of exploring the stars. He found the sisters to be attentive listeners, genuinely curious about his world and experiences. The impending sandstorm added urgency to their preparations. Once it hit, travel between the mining base and the Eltharian settlement would be impossible for at least 3 days. The tribal council meeting was scheduled for the day before the storm was predicted to arrive, a timing that Lyra assured Cale was not coincidental. The council always meets before major storms, she explained. It is a tradition dating back to the Great Drying, when communities needed to confirm their resource allocations before being isolated by the weather. Convenient timing for Clan Siraval, Cale noted. Indeed, Lyra agreed. If they succeed in challenging the guardianship at the council, they could claim custody of us before the storm, when outside intervention would be impossible. On the morning of the council meeting, Cale awoke to find formal attire laid out for him, a human-style suit, modified with elements of Eltharian formal wear. The fabric shimmered with subtle iridescence, echoing the natural luminescence of Eltharian skin. "Where did this come from?" he asked when Neris entered the common area. "Mira has connections in the market district," Neris explained. "The garment is appropriate for a guardian representing House Jar at the council." Cale examined the outfit with a mixture of appreciation and apprehension. "It looks expensive." "Consider it an investment in our collective security," Neris replied. The sisters had also dressed formally, their robes more elaborate than their everyday attire. Even Mira, usually casual in her appearance, had adopted a dignified bearing that made her seem older and more serious. "Remember the protocols we discussed," Lyra advised as they prepared to leave. "Speak only when addressed directly by the council leader. Maintain eye contact with the speaker, but do not stare at the ancestral markings. It is considered disrespectful. Keep your right hand visible at all times," Neris added. "It signifies peaceful intent." "And don't accept any food or drink offered by Clan Siraval," Mira chimed in. "Just a general precaution." Cale absorbed these last-minute instructions, feeling like a student before a crucial examination. "Anything else?" "Yes," Lyra said solemnly. "Remember that you represent not only yourself, but House Jar. Whatever you may think of our father's actions, we are now bound together. Our honor is your honor." The walk to the tribal council chambers took them through the heart of the Eltharian settlement. The architecture was a blend of ancient stonework and modern material structures designed to withstand the harsh desert environment, while honoring traditional forms. The approaching storm had cast a bronze haze over everything, the atmosphere heavy with static electricity. Eltharians stopped to observe their passage, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Kale felt acutely aware of his alien status, despite the formal attire that marked him as a guardian of an Eltharian house. The council chambers were housed in a massive circular building at the center of the settlement. Its walls were inscribed with the history of Elthar, a visual record stretching back to before human contact. Guards in ceremonial armor flanked the entrance, their weapons ornate but functional. Inside the chamber was arranged in concentric circles, with the tribal leaders seated in the innermost ring. Representatives of the various houses occupied the middle rings, while observers filled the outermost circle. A hush fell over the assembly as Kale and the sisters entered. Lyra guided them to their designated position in the middle ring, the space reserved for House Jar noticeably less prominent than those of more prosperous clans. Directly across from them sat the representatives of Clan Siraval, including the nobleman who had been gambling with Lord Jar on the fateful night. "That is Varch Siraval," Lyra whispered to Kale, "the clan's lead negotiator and enforcer." Varch met Kale's gaze with undisguised contempt, his posture radiating confidence and threat. Beside him sat two Eltharian males, whose ancestral markings identified them as Siraval affiliates, their expressions equally hostile. The council leader, a venerable Eltharian with intricate markings covering her entire visible skin, rose to call the meeting to order. The proceedings began with traditional invocations and reports on community matters, water allocations, trade agreements, preparation for the sandstorm. Kale listened attentively, following Lyra's subtle cues about when to stand, when to bow, when to make the ritualistic gestures of respect. Finally, the council leader addressed the matter of House Jar. "It has come to the council's attention that a guardianship bond has been established between the daughters of Lord Jar and an off-worlder, one Kale Moreno of Earth. Is the guardian present?" Kale stood, his right hand visible as instructed. "I am here, Honorable Elder." "And do you acknowledge the bond of guardianship freely and without reservation?" the elder asked. Kale hesitated for a fraction of a second, remembering Lyra's coaching. "I acknowledge the bond and the responsibilities it entails. I stand as guardian to House Jar until such time as Lord Jar reclaims his right of parentage, or until the daughters of House Jar choose to release me from the bond." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Kale had quoted the formal acceptance precisely as Lyra had taught him. The elder nodded in approval. "The council recognizes Guardian Moreno's commitment," she declared. "Are there any who wish to challenge the validity of this bond?" Varch Siraval rose immediately. "I, Varch of Clan Siraval, challenge the bond on grounds of prior claim and deception." "State your claim," the elder instructed. Lord Jar had already pledged his daughters to Clan Siraval as payment for his debts, Varch asserted. The guardianship bond was established in bad faith, as a means of evading this legitimate obligation. "Guardian Moreno, how do you respond to this challenge?" the elder asked. Kale rose again, recalling Lyra's guidance. "Honorable Elder, the pledge between Lord Jar and Clan Siraval was for service, not guardianship. When Clan Siraval rejected the offer of wards, Lord Jar was within his rights to seek another guardian for his daughters. The bond was established with proper form and witnessed by tribal elders. Clan Siraval's claim is based on a commercial transaction that they themselves rejected." His response brought another wave of murmurs, some approving, others skeptical. The elder considered for a moment before turning to Varch. "The guardian speaks truly. You rejected the offer of wards in favor of servants. By our laws, Lord Jar was free to establish a guardianship bond elsewhere. Your challenge on grounds of prior claim is dismissed. Varch's expression darkened, but he bowed in acknowledgement of the ruling. Then, I challenge on grounds of Guardian Moreno's unfitness to protect the daughters of House Jar. On what basis do you claim unfitness? The elder inquired. The Guardian is an off-worlder unfamiliar with our ways and customs, Varch argued. He is a temporary resident with no permanent ties to Elthar. Moreover, he lacks the resources and influence necessary to properly maintain the status of 3 daughters of a noble house. How can such a guardian offer adequate protection or guidance? The challenge struck at Kale's obvious vulnerabilities, and he felt a momentary panic. Lyra had prepared him for legal arguments, not personal attacks on his character and circumstances. Before he could respond, Neris stood. I request the right to speak for House Jar in this matter. The elder nodded permission, and Neris addressed the assembly with quiet dignity. Honorable elder, respected council members, the fitness of a guardian is measured not by wealth or status, but by integrity and commitment. In the short time since the bond was established, Guardian Moreno has demonstrated both. He has secured appropriate accommodations for us, respected our traditions, and begun learning our ways. He has shown honor, where others showed only self-interest. She turned to face Varch directly. Clan Siraval speaks of resources and influence. Yet what House Jar requires now is not luxury, but protection and respect. Guardian Moreno offers both without the ulterior motives that color Clan Siraval's sudden interest in our welfare. Neris's speech, delivered with the conviction of a warrior and the eloquence of a diplomat, visibly swayed many in the assembly. Even some of the tribal leaders nodded in agreement with her assessment. Varch, however, was not finished. Pretty words, but they do not address the fundamental issue. The Guardian has no training in Eltharian defense techniques, no knowledge of our political alliances, no understanding of the threats that face House Jar. How can he protect what he does not comprehend? It was Lyra who stood next. With respect, that argument assumes the Guardian must act alone. The strength of a house comes from all its members working in concert. I have been instructing Guardian Moreno in our diplomatic protocols. Neris has been training him in combat techniques, adapted for his physiology. Mira has been sharing knowledge of the settlement's geography and social networks. Together, we form a unified house with each member contributing their unique strengths. The elder turned to Kale. Guardian Moreno, do you wish to respond to the challenge? Kale stood drawing on everything he had learned from the sisters over the past days. Honorable elder, I acknowledge that I am new to your ways. I did not seek the role of guardian, but now that it has been entrusted to me, I am committed to fulfilling it with honor. I may be an off-worlder, but I am not without resources. I have technical skills that few on Elthar possess. I have connections within the mining operation that can benefit House Jar. Most importantly, I have the trust and cooperation of my wards, who have shown me more patience and wisdom than many who claim superior understanding of your culture. He met Varch's gaze steadily. Clan Siraval questions my fitness based on what I lack. I would suggest that fitness be judged on what I offer and on the preference of those most affected by this guardianship. A hush fell over the assembly as the elder considered Kale's words. Finally, she turned to the 3 sisters. Daughters of House Jar, it is unusual to consult wards on matters of guardianship, but these are unusual circumstances. Do you accept Kale Moreno as your guardian with full knowledge of the alternatives? The sisters stepped forward together, presenting a united front. It was Lyra who spoke for them. We accept Guardian Moreno without reservation. We reject any claim by Clan Siraval, whose interest in our welfare appeared only when it served their ambitions. The elder nodded slowly. The council has heard the arguments and the testimony of the affected parties. It is the ruling of this body that the guardianship bond between Kale Moreno and the daughters of House Jar is valid and binding. The challenge of Clan Siraval is dismissed. A mixture of reactions rippled through the assembly: approval from some, disappointment from others, and unmistakable anger from Varch and his associates. The Siraval representative rose stiffly, offering the minimal required bow to the elder, before striding from the chamber, his affiliates close behind. The council recognizes House Morenojar, the elder declared using a nomenclature that caught Kale by surprise. May your union bring honor to both lineages. The remainder of the council meeting addressed other matters, but Kale found it difficult to concentrate. He had succeeded in defending the guardianship, but Varch's retreat felt more like a strategic withdrawal than a surrender. The look in the Siraval leader's eyes had promised retribution. As they left the council chambers, Kale voiced his concerns to the sisters. Varch isn't going to accept this decision, is he? No, Neris confirmed grimly. Clan Siraval is not known for respecting rulings that go against their interests. What does that mean for us? It means we must be vigilant, Lyra said. The sandstorm will provide a natural barrier for the next few days, but once it passes, we should expect some form of retaliation. Legal or otherwise, Mira added. The walk back to the mining base was tense, all of them alert for any sign of Siraval agents. The storm was visibly approaching now, the sky darkening to a deep amber as the first wave of sand clouds rolled in from the desert. Wind whipped around them carrying grit that stung exposed skin and reduced visibility. They had almost reached the base perimeter when Mira suddenly pulled Kale into a narrow alleyway between buildings. The sisters followed, without question pressing themselves against the wall. Siraval enforcers, Mira whispered, gesturing toward the main pathway they had been following. 5 of them armed. Kale peered around the corner and saw the Eltharians Mira had indicated. They were dressed in the distinctive armor of clan enforcers, their weapons not ceremonial, but practical energy lances, capable of incapacitating or killing, depending on the setting. They're between us and the base, Kale observed. Any other way in? The maintenance tunnels, Mira suggested. There's an access point 2 blocks from here. Too obvious, Neris countered. That would be the first alternate route they'd cover. The storm shelter network, Lyra proposed. There's an entrance behind the market district that connects to the base's emergency bunker. That could work, Kale agreed. Lead the way. They backtracked through the alleyways moving parallel to the main thoroughfare, but out of sight of the Siraval enforcers. The storm was intensifying the wind, now strong enough to make walking difficult. Sand pelted them from all directions, forcing them to cover their faces. The entrance to the storm shelter network was a heavy metal door, set into the ground behind a row of market stalls. Lyra activated the access panel with a complex sequence of touches, and the door slid open to reveal a stairwell descending into darkness. These shelters date back to the early settlement days, Lyra explained, as they made their way down. They're maintained as emergency refuges during major storms, but few remember that they connect to the mining base. The tunnels were dimly lit by emergency lighting that activated as they moved through the network. The air was stale but breathable, the temperature noticeably cooler than the surface. They followed Lyra's lead through a series of intersections, the layout clearly familiar to the sisters. How do you know these passages so well? Kale asked Mira, who had taken the lead alongside Lyra. Our mother showed us, Mira replied. She said knowledge of alternate paths was always valuable in uncertain times. Wise advice, Kale acknowledged. They had been traversing the tunnels for perhaps 20 minutes, when a distant sound reached them, the heavy tread of multiple sets of footsteps, echoing through the network. Siraval, Neris said, her voice low. They've followed us into the shelters. How? Kale demanded. No one saw us enter. They may have been tracking us all along, Lyra suggested, waiting for an opportunity to catch us away from witnesses. How far to the base entrance? Kale asked. Too far, Mira admitted. They'll catch us before we reach it. Neris's expression hardened with resolve. Then we make our stand here. This junction provides some defensive advantages. She indicated the tunnel configuration, which would force their pursuers to approach in a narrow file. Defensive advantage or not, it's 5 armed enforcers against the 4 of us, Kale pointed out. 3, Lyra corrected. I am not trained for combat. Neither am I really, Kale admitted. A few days of training doesn't make me a warrior. Then it is time to use what we have, Lyra said, her expression suddenly determined. "The knowledge our mother entrusted to us." Neris looked alarmed. "The ring's here, Lyra. We have never attempted the full activation." "We have never needed to before," Lyra countered. "But now, we face a direct threat to our lives and our guardians. If not now, when?" The footsteps were growing louder, their pursuers closing the distance rapidly. Kale looked from one sister to another, seeing the weight of the decision in their faces. "What do you need me to do?" he asked simply. Lyra met his gaze with gratitude. "Stand with us. Complete the circle. The rest we will manage." The sisters positioned themselves at 3 points of a triangle, with Kyle directed to stand in the center. The footsteps were close now, accompanied by the distinctive hum of energy lances being armed. "Whatever happens, do not move from your position until the rings are fully formed," Neris instructed Kale. "The energy must flow through you as the anchor point." Before Kale could ask for clarification, the sisters began a harmonic chant in their native language. The sound resonated in the tunnel, creating acoustic patterns that seemed to shift and swirl around them. As they chanted, Kale felt a strange sensation, a tingling along his skin, as if the very air was becoming electrically charged. The first of the Siraval enforcers appeared at the tunnel junction energy lance raised. The leader Varch himself barked an order in the Eltharian language, too rapid for Kale's translator to process. The sisters continued their chant, uninterrupted by the threat. Light began to emanate from their bodies, Neris glowing amber, Lyra blue, Mira green. The colors spiraled outward from each sister, forming luminous rings that expanded and contracted in rhythm with their chanting. Varch shouted again, and one of his enforcers leveled an energy lance at Kale. As the weapon discharged, the rings of light suddenly converged, passing through Kale and connecting the sisters in a triangle of brilliant energy. The lance's discharge struck the field of light and dissipated harmlessly. The Eltharians stared in shock as the energy pattern expanded further, forming a dome that surrounded Kale and the sisters. Within this protective shell, Kale felt a profound sense of connection to the 3 women. Their thoughts, their emotions, their very essence momentarily shared with him through the energy field. Varch recovered from his surprise and ordered a coordinated attack. All 5 enforcers fired their weapons simultaneously at different points of the energy dome. The impacts created ripples of light, but could not penetrate the barrier. "The rings are holding," Lyra said, her voice strained but triumphant. "But we cannot maintain this indefinitely." "We don't need to," Kale realized. "We just need to reach the base." He reached into his pocket for his communicator, thankful that it still functioned within the energy field. "This is Engineer Moreno Security Override 7225. I have a security situation in the Storm Shelter Network Junction E17, requesting immediate armed response." The reply came almost instantly. "Acknowledged, Engineer Moreno. Security team dispatched to your location. Hold position." Varch seemed to understand that reinforcements were coming. He gestured to his enforcers, and they backed away, maintaining a wary distance from the energy dome. "This changes nothing, off-worlder," Varch called out, his voice distorted by the energy field. "The storm will pass. The base cannot protect you forever. And now, we have seen the rings in action, knowledge that will serve Clan Siraval well." "The knowledge is incomplete without the true wielders," Lyra replied, her voice carrying clearly through the barrier. "What you have witnessed is but a fraction of the ring's potential." Whether this was true or a strategic bluff, Kale couldn't tell, but it gave Varch pause. The Siraval leader studied them for a moment longer, then signaled his enforcers to retreat. They disappeared back into the tunnel network just as the sound of approaching security personnel reached them from the opposite direction. As the threat receded, the sisters gradually released the energy field, the luminous rings contracting and finally disappearing altogether. All 3 looked exhausted, their iridescent skin dull, and their posture slumped. "That was incredible," Kale said, still feeling echoes of the connection they had shared. "And dangerous," Neris admitted. We have never attempted the full triangulation before. The energy drain is substantial. But now we know it works. Mira pointed out her usual enthusiasm, dampened by fatigue, but not extinguished. We can protect ourselves and Kale. At a cost, Lyra cautioned. And Varch is right about one thing: he has now witnessed the rings in action. That knowledge will make Clan Siraval more determined than ever to possess the complete capability. The base security team arrived armed and alert. Kyle explained the situation in terms they would understand tribal rivals, with a grudge attempting to intimidate him and his wards. He omitted any mention of the sacred rings, describing the confrontation as a simple standoff, resolved by his call for assistance. The security officer seemed skeptical, but accepted Kale's explanation. The storm's hitting full force now. No one's going anywhere for at least 3 days. You and your guests should be safe until then. And after that, Kale asked. The officer shrugged. Tribal disputes aren't our jurisdiction. But if they bring weapons onto base property again, we'll respond accordingly. It wasn't the reassurance Kale had hoped for, but it would have to do. He guided the exhausted sisters through the remaining tunnel section, to the base entrance and, from there, to their quarters. The storm was now raging outside, the sound of sand striking the base's outer shell, a constant background roar. Once inside their quarters, the sisters collapsed onto the nearest seating, their energy reserves clearly depleted by the ring activation. Kyle brought them water and energy supplements, watching with concern as they slowly recovered. "Will you be all right?" he asked. "The energy transfer takes a toll," Lyra explained, her voice weak. "But we will recover with rest." "That was the first time we've completed the full triangulation," Neris added. "Our mother warned us that it would be taxing until we built up our endurance." "It was worth it," Mira declared, despite her obvious exhaustion. "Did you see Varch's face when the energy lance couldn't penetrate the field priceless?" Despite the gravity of their situation, Kale found himself smiling at Mira's indomitable spirit. "You three are full of surprises." "As are you, Guardian," Lyra observed. "You stood firm when many would have fled. You anchored the rings without training or preparation." "I didn't do anything," Kale protested. "I just stood there while you three did all the work." "The anchor point requires courage and trust," Neris explained. "Without those qualities, the energy would have rejected you, possibly with harmful effects. You provided exactly what was needed." Kale wasn't sure how to respond to that. The events of the past few hours had shifted something fundamental in his perception of the sisters and his role as their guardian. This was no longer simply about fulfilling an obligation imposed by alien custom. He had stood with them against a genuine threat, had felt the connection that bound them together through the sacred rings. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Varch and his enforcers will be waiting when the storm passes." "We use the time wisely," Lyra suggested. "We prepare defenses, both physical and diplomatic. The Council ruled in our favor today. That gives us standing to request additional protection if necessary." "And we continue your training," Neris added. "You have natural aptitude. With proper instruction, you could become formidable." "And I'll talk to my contacts in the market district," Mira chimed in. "Siraval isn't universally loved. There may be others willing to stand with House Moreno-Jar against them." House Moreno-Jar. Kale repeated the designation, still strange to his ears. "The Elder called us that at the council meeting. What does it mean exactly?" "It signifies that the council recognizes you, not just as a temporary guardian, but as the head of a new house, a merger of your lineage with ours," Lyra explained. "It is a great honor, rarely bestowed on off-worlders." "So I'm not just stuck with 3 alien princesses," Kale said with a wry smile. "I've somehow acquired an entire noble house." "Is that so terrible?" Mira asked, her green eyes wide in questioning. Kale considered the events that had brought him to this point. 4 days ago, he had been a solitary engineer, counting the months until his contract ended. Now, he was the guardian of 3 remarkable women, the head of a recognized house, and the target of a powerful clan's enmity. His life had become enormously complicated, potentially dangerous, and completely unlike the controlled existence he had planned. And yet, looking at the three sisters, Neris, with her warrior's pride, Lyra, with her diplomatic wisdom, Mira, with her irrepressible spirit, he couldn't bring himself to regret the turn his life had taken. "No," he answered honestly. "Not terrible at all. Unexpected, certainly. Challenging, definitely. But not terrible." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then, in a gesture that surprised him, they each extended a hand toward him, palms up, an Eltharian gesture of acceptance and trust. Kale hesitated for only a moment before placing his hands in theirs, completing the circle. No energy field appeared this time. No luminous rings materialized, but he felt a connection nonetheless, a bond formed not by ancient technology or tribal law, but by shared experience and mutual respect. "So," he said, looking at each of them in turn, "House Moreno-Jar. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Mira's laugh broke the solemnity of the moment, joined soon by Lyra's softer chuckle, and even a rare smile from Neris. As the storm raged outside, sealing them off from the rest of Elthar for the coming days, Kale realized that he no longer felt trapped or burdened by his unexpected responsibilities. Whatever challenges Clan Siraval or others might bring, they would face them together. The sandstorm lasted for 5 days longer than initially predicted. During that time, the mining base operated on emergency protocols, with only essential personnel on duty. Kale's responsibilities as an environmental engineer became more critical than ever, ensuring that the life support systems continued to function despite the stress placed on them by the storm. Between his shifts, he continued training with Neris, whose instruction had taken on a new urgency after the confrontation with Varch. She pushed him harder, introducing more advanced techniques adapted for his human physiology versus Eltharian opponents. To his surprise, Kale found himself not just complying, but actively engaging with the training, his body and mind responding to the challenge. Lyra's diplomatic lessons expanded to include detailed information about the power structures within Eltharian society, the complex web of alliances and rivalries that define tribal politics. She taught him the nuances of formal address, the significance of various ceremonial gestures, and the legal precedents that might be useful in defending their position against future challenges from Clan Siraval. Mira, despite being confined to the base by the storm, managed to establish a network of contacts among the Eltharian service personnel who maintained the facility. Through them, she gathered information about Siraval movements before the storm and potential plans for when it cleared. Her natural charm and seemingly boundless energy made her an effective intelligence gatherer, turning casual conversations into valuable sources of information. The quarters that had initially seemed cramped for 4 people gradually transformed into a home. Personal spaces were established, routines developed, and meals became occasions for conversation rather than merely functional nutrition. Kyle found himself looking forward to these moments of connection, the shared stories and occasional laughter that punctuated their otherwise serious preparations. On the 3rd night of the storm, as they finished a meal prepared by Lyra from their combined rations, Kale broached a subject that had been nagging at him since the tunnel confrontation. The sacred rings. He began noting how the sisters immediately grew attentive. "What exactly are they? I know you said they're defensive in nature, but there's clearly more to them than that." The sisters exchanged glances, one of their silent communications that Kale had come to recognize, but not yet decipher. Finally, Lyra spoke. "The rings are remnants of Elthar's ancient past before the Great Drying, when our world was rich with water and life. Our ancestors created them as a means of controlling the increasingly volatile weather patterns as the climate shifted. They generate energy fields that can repel or redirect forces originally wound in water, later adapted for more immediate threats." "Like energy weapons," Kale observed. "Yes," Lyra confirmed. "But they are more than simple shields. The rings connect those within their protection, creating a unified defense that draws strength from each participant. I felt that, Kale admitted. When you activated them in the tunnel, it was like I could sense each of you, not just physically, but somehow deeper. The connection goes beyond the physical, Neris explained. It touches the essence of those within the circle. That is why the anchor point your position requires trust. Without it, the connection cannot form properly. And that's why Clan Siraval wants this technology, Kale surmised. Not just for protection, but for the advantage it would give them in tribal politics. Precisely, Lyra agreed. Imagine being able to sense the true intentions of those you negotiate with, to know their strengths and weaknesses at a fundamental level. In diplomatic contexts, such knowledge would be invaluable. And in combat, it would make a fighting force nearly unstoppable, Neris added. Warriors connected by the rings would move as one, anticipating each other's actions perfectly. So, the three of you are the only ones who know how to activate the rings? Kyle asked. The only ones with the complete knowledge, Mira clarified. Our mother divided the activation sequence among us for safety. I know the initial harmonic pattern, Lyra knows the energy flow configurations, and Neris knows the stabilization protocols. Only together can we form the complete rings. And now, Varch has seen them in action, Kale noted grimly. Even if he doesn't have the complete knowledge, he knows what's possible. Which makes us more valuable to him, Lyra concluded, and more dangerous to leave independent. The implications hung in the air between them. Clan Siraval would not abandon their pursuit easily, not with such power at stake. There's something I don't understand, Kale said after a thoughtful pause. If the rings are so valuable, why didn't your father use them to solve his problems? Why gamble away his daughters when you three together represent such a powerful asset? Another silent exchange passed between the sisters, before Neris answered, her voice tight, with suppressed emotion. Our father does not know the full extent of the ring's capabilities. Our mother kept much of the knowledge secret even from him. She feared he lacked the judgment to use it wisely. After she died, he became fixated on gambling and drinking. Mira added, her usual exuberance dimmed by the painful subject. He barely noticed us anymore, let alone what we might be capable of. We chose not to enlighten him, Lyra said quietly. Perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps if he had understood our value, he would not have wagered us so casually. But our mother's warning seemed prudent, especially as his behavior grew more erratic. Kale absorbed this information, understanding now another layer of the sisters' complex situation. They had been protecting not just themselves, but the power they collectively wielded, making difficult choices about trust and security, long before he entered their lives. Thank you for trusting me with this, he said simply. You earned that trust, Neris replied. Few would have stood with us against Siraval enforcers, knowing so little about what they were defending. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but Kyle remained thoughtful. The responsibilities of guardianship had expanded far beyond providing shelter and sustenance. He was now protector of both the sisters and the ancient technology. They controlled a technology that could shift the balance of power on Elthar if misused. As the storm finally began to abate on the 5th day, Kale realized that his perspective had fundamentally changed. The remaining months of his contract no longer represented a countdown to escape, but a timeline for establishing security for House Moreno-Jar. And beyond that, the future that had once seemed so clearly defined now held possibilities he had never considered. The mining base returned to normal operations as the storm cleared the accumulated sand, being systematically removed from critical systems and pathways. Kyle resumed his regular maintenance duties, though he remained alert for any sign of Siraval activity. Mira's network of contacts reported that Varch and his enforcers had weathered the storm in the settlement, apparently making preparations of their own. They've been gathering support among the lesser clans, Mira reported during their evening meal, promising favors and concessions in exchange for backing against us. Can they challenge the council's ruling so soon? Kale asked Lyra. Not directly, she replied. But they can create a climate of opinion that makes our position more difficult. If enough clans align against us, the council might be pressured to reconsider. Then we need allies of our own, Kale decided. Are there clans that oppose Siraval others who might stand with us? House Talari has been a traditional rival of Clan Siraval, Lyra suggested. And Clan Vosh has no love for Varch after he outmaneuvered them in a water rights dispute last season. Can you arrange meetings with their representatives? Kyle asked. I can try, Lyra agreed. But they will want to know what House Moreno-Jar offers in return for their support. Kale considered this challenge. As a newly formed house with limited resources, what could they offer potential allies? Then inspiration struck. Engineering expertise, he proposed. The mining base has technology that could benefit the Eltharian clans: water reclamation systems, energy efficiency improvements, environmental controls. I could adapt these for their needs. That might work, Lyra said, sounding impressed. Many of the older houses struggle with infrastructure that was designed before the climate shift intensified. Technical improvements would be valuable indeed. And I can offer combat training to their house guards, Neris added, warming to the idea. Human fighting techniques are unknown to most Eltharians. The element of surprise could give them an advantage in clan disputes. And I know all the best trade routes and market connections, Mira chimed in. I could help them secure better prices for their goods. So we approach them as partners, not supplicants, Kale summarized. We have value to offer just as they do. The strategy proved effective. Over the next several days, Lyra arranged discreet meetings with representatives from House Talari and Clan Vosh. Kale presented their proposals, emphasizing the mutual benefits of alliance against Clan Siraval's growing influence. Neris demonstrated selected combat techniques that impressed the clan warriors, while Mira charmed the trade representatives with her knowledge of market dynamics. By the end of the week, both House Talari and Clan Vosh had agreed to formal alliances with House Moreno-Jar. The agreements were registered with the Tribal Council, lending legitimacy to Kale's position as guardian and house leader. More importantly, they provided a counterbalance to Clan Siraval's coalition, creating a political stalemate that would make direct action against the sisters more difficult. Varch was not idle during this time. Mira's contacts reported increased Siraval activity around the mining base perimeter and attempts to bribe base personnel for information about Kale's movements. Security protocols were enhanced in response, with Kale and the sisters receiving priority protection status due to the potential diplomatic implications of any incident. Despite these precautions, tension remained high. Kyle found himself constantly vigilant, even during routine tasks. The sisters were equally alert, their senses attuned to any potential threat. They had begun practicing short-duration ring activations daily, building their endurance for the energy transfer and refining their control of the defensive field. 2 weeks after the storm cleared, the Tribal Council convened again for its regular session. Kyle attended as the representative of House Moreno-Jar, accompanied by Neris, while Lyra and Mira remained at the base as a precaution against Siraval attempts to separate them. The council proceedings were formal and largely routine until Varch rose to address the assembly. His proposal was unexpected, a tribal gathering to celebrate the successful passage through the Great Storm, to be hosted jointly by all the major clans. Such celebrations were once a tradition on Elthar, the elder explained to Kale after approving Varch's proposal. They served to renew bonds between clans after the isolation of the storm season. The practice has waned in recent years, but there is merit in reviving it. And all houses are expected to participate? Kale asked, sensing a trap, but unable to identify its exact nature. It would be noted if House Moreno-Jar were absent, the elder confirmed. Particularly as a newly recognized house, seeking to establish itself within the tribal structure. Kale exchanged a glance with Neris, whose expression conveyed similar suspicion. Then, of course, we will attend, he declared. House Moreno-Jar is honored to join in this celebration of Eltharian tradition. Varch's smile was thin, but triumphant. Excellent. The gathering will be held in the Great Plaza in 3 days' time. All clans will contribute to the festivities, of course. As they left the council chambers, Neris voiced the concern that had been building since Varch's announcement. This is a ploy. He is forcing us into a public setting where our allies cannot openly protect us without violating the peace of the celebration. I know, Kyle agreed, but refusing would make us look weak and isolated. We need to attend, but with a strategy of our own. They returned to the base to find Lyra and Mira eagerly awaiting news of the council meeting. When informed of the upcoming gathering, their reactions mirrored Kale's own suspicion. The timing is too convenient, Lyra observed. Varch must have been planning this since the storm cleared. It gives him a perfect opportunity to move against us, while maintaining the appearance of honoring tribal traditions. Then we prepare for trouble, Kale decided. But we also use this as an opportunity to strengthen our position. If Varch wants to play politics, we can play too. The next 3 days were a flurry of activity as they prepared for the gathering. Lyra drafted formal statements, establishing House Moreno-Jar's position on various tribal matters, creating a political identity that aligned with their allies, but maintained independence. Neris intensified Kale's combat training, focusing on techniques that would be effective in a crowded public setting. Mira worked with her contacts to arrange an impressive display of goods and services that would represent their house at the gathering, emphasizing the unique blend of human and Eltharian elements that defined them. Kale, meanwhile, focused on security arrangements. He coordinated with base security to establish emergency protocols in case of trouble at the gathering. He met with representatives of their allied houses to discreetly synchronize their positioning in the Great Plaza. And he worked on a specialized device of his own design, a compact signal generator that could activate the base's emergency response system from anywhere in the settlement. On the day of the gathering, the 4 of them dressed in formal attire that symbolized their unique status, traditional Eltharian designs, executed in earth materials with both human and Eltharian symbols incorporated into the patterns. As guardian and house leader, Kale wore a ceremonial mantle that Lyra had commissioned from a respected Eltharian artisan, its design acknowledging his human origins while honoring Eltharian aesthetic traditions. The Great Plaza was already crowded when they arrived, representatives from all the major and minor clans arranged in a complex pattern that reflected their status and alliances. Varch and the Siraval contingent occupied a prominent position near the central fountain, their display of wealth and influence ostentatious even by Eltharian standards. House Moreno-Jar was assigned a location that, while not dishonorably peripheral, placed them at a distance from their allies, a positioning that Kale recognized as deliberate. Nevertheless, they established their presence with quiet dignity, the unique products and technological models they had brought, drawing interested attention from neighboring clans. The formal ceremonies began with traditional invocations and expressions of gratitude for survival through the storm season. Clan leaders made offerings at the central fountain, a ritual that Lyra had carefully coached Kale on. When his turn came, he performed the ceremony flawlessly, his pronunciations of the ancient Eltharian phrases clear and respectful. As the ritual portion of the gathering concluded, the atmosphere shifted to one of celebration. Music filled the plaza, food and drink were shared between clans, and the rigid positioning began to relax as representatives mingled more freely. It was during this transition that Varch made his approach, flanked by 2 of his enforcers. Guardian Moreno. Varch greeted him, the translator, rendering his tone as cordial, though his body language remained tense. Your performance of the offering ritual was impressive for an off-worlder. You have clearly had excellent instruction. House Moreno-Jar is fortunate in its members, Kale replied diplomatically. Each brings valuable skills and knowledge. Indeed, Varch agreed. Which makes your house an intriguing addition to our tribal structure. Perhaps we have begun our relationship in an unfortunate manner. Clan Siraval would be open to discussing a more Productive arrangement. Kale maintained a neutral expression, though internally, he was alert for the trap that surely lay behind this apparent olive branch. House Moreno-Jar is always willing to engage in respectful dialogue with other clans. What arrangement did you have in mind? An exchange of expertise, Varch suggested smoothly. Your house offers unique technological insights. Clan Siroval has generations of experience in tribal politics and resource management. Together, we could create significant advantages for both our people. An interesting proposal, Kyle acknowledged. Though I note it comes after failed attempts to challenge our guardianship bond and apparent preparations for less diplomatic approaches. Varch's expression hardened momentarily before he regained his composure. Past misunderstandings. The storm season gives us all time to reconsider our positions. Clan Siroval recognizes the Council's ruling on the guardianship matter. We now seek more constructive engagement. I will consult with the members of my house, Kyle said, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture. Unity in decision-making is a principle we value highly. Of course, Varch replied, with a thin smile. Family consultation is important. Speaking of family, I understand Lord Jar has been inquiring about his daughter's welfare. As a concerned relative, I have assured him that they are well treated under your guardianship. The mention of Lord Jar was clearly meant to unsettle Kale, a reminder that the sister's father could potentially reclaim them if he stabilized his position. Kale refused to take the bait. Please convey my respects to Lord Jar when next you speak with him, he said evenly. House Moreno-Jar would welcome his participation in our development, should he wish to engage constructively. Varch's eyes narrowed slightly at this diplomatic parry. I will certainly convey your message. In the meantime, please enjoy the gathering. Clan Siroval has provided a special beverage for the occasion, a rare distillation from the deep desert plants. I insist that you try it. As if on cue, an Eltharian server appeared with a tray of ornate glasses, containing a luminescent blue liquid. Varch took one, and held it out to Kale with a challenging stare. Kale recalled Mira's warning from their first day together. Don't accept any food or drink offered by Clan Siroval. The trap was becoming clearer now, a public setting, a seemingly friendly overture, and a drink that almost certainly contained something more than alcohol. Your generosity honors us, Kale said, taking the glass but not drinking from it. In my culture, we have a tradition of toasting to new beginnings. Perhaps you would join me in establishing this human custom among the clans. Varch hesitated clearly, not having anticipated this response. To refuse would be a visible breach of the gathering's etiquette. Reluctantly, he took a glass for himself. Kale raised his glass. To productive arrangements between House Moreno-Jar and Clan Siroval, founded on mutual respect and transparency. The emphasis on transparency was subtle, but clear to Varch, whose expression flickered with annoyance. Nevertheless, he raised his own glass in response. Kale made a show of bringing the glass to his lips, but did not actually drink, using a sleight of hand technique that Mira had taught him for such scenarios. Varch, trapped by his own scheme, was forced to take a small sip of the beverage he had offered. A unique flavor, Kale commented, setting his glass aside. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should attend to my house's representatives. Many clans have expressed interest in our technological offerings. He bowed slightly and moved away, leaving Varch visibly frustrated by the encounter. As soon as he was out of earshot, Kale sought out Neris, who had been observing from a strategic position nearby. The drink was almost certainly drugged, he told her quietly. They're getting desperate. Or more determined, Neris countered. This public attempt suggests they're prepared to move beyond subtle approaches. Agreed. Let's find Lyra and Mira and maintain visual contact for the remainder of the gathering. I don't trust Varch not to try something else. They located the other sisters who had been engaging with representatives from allied clans and discreetly informed them of the encounter with Varch. For the next hour, they navigated the gathering carefully, always keeping at least one of them in sight of the others, while continuing to build relationships with potential allies. As the celebration reached its peak with dancing and performances taking center stage in the plaza, Kale noticed a subtle shift in the positioning of Siraval enforcers. They were gradually spreading out, taking positions that could potentially isolate the sisters from each other and from Kale. "They're making another move," he murmured to Lyra, who was nearest to him. "Signal Neris and Mira. We need to stay together." Lyra made a casual gesture that caught her sister's attention. They began moving toward a predetermined rendezvous point they had established as part of their security planning. Kale followed, keeping a careful eye on the Siraval enforcers, who had definitely noticed their movement and were adjusting their own positions in response. They had almost reached their meeting point when a commotion erupted on the opposite side of the plaza, a performance gone awry, with props crashing down and spectators scattering in confusion. The distraction was perfectly timed and obviously staged. In the moment of chaos, 3 Siraval enforcers moved with practiced precision, cutting Mira off from the others and herding her toward a side exit from the plaza. Kale saw it happening, but was too far away to intervene directly. Without hesitation, he activated the signal device he had prepared, sending an emergency alert to both the base security team and their allied clan representatives. Neris reacted immediately, vaulting over a decorative barrier and landing directly in the path of the enforcers. Her training as a warrior was evident in every movement as she engaged them, her techniques effectively slowing their progress despite being outnumbered. Lyra moved toward Mira from another angle, using the diplomatic immunity of the gathering to call out the violation of peace in a voice that carried across the plaza. "Clan Siraval breaks the sacred truce of the gathering. Witness their dishonor." The public accusation forced many of the clan representatives to take notice, awkwardly obligating them to acknowledge the breach of protocol. Meanwhile, Kale had circled around behind the Siraval enforcers, using the continuing distraction to approach unnoticed. Just as Neris began to falter against the 3 opponents Kale struck from behind, employing the techniques she had taught him with surprising effectiveness. His attack disrupted their coordination, creating an opening for Mira to break free and join Lyra. Varch, seeing his plan unraveling, signaled for more enforcers to join the fray. But before they could reach the confrontation, representatives from House Talari and Clan Vosh intervened, forming a barrier between the Siraval forces and House Moreno-Jar. "This gathering is protected by ancient law," declared the Talari representative, her authority as a tribal elder, lending weight to her words. "Clan Siraval has violated the peace. They will withdraw immediately or face sanction from the council." Varch's expression was murderous, but the public nature of the confrontation left him little room to maneuver. Too many witnesses had seen his enforcers make the first move against a member of a recognized house during a sacred gathering. The political cost of escalating further would be severe. "A misunderstanding," he claimed, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "My enforcers were responding to a perceived threat to the gathering's security. If offense was given, Clan Siraval regrets the confusion." The non-apology was transparently false, but it provided the minimum face-saving gesture required by protocol. The Talari elder acknowledged it with a curt nod, maintaining the barrier between the opposing groups. Kale reached Neris, who had sustained minor injuries in the confrontation, but remained standing proudly. Together, they joined Lyra and Mira, the 4 of them presenting a unified front, as base security personnel finally arrived their human weapons, adding a significant deterrent to further Siraval action. House Moreno-Jar withdraws from the gathering, Kale announced, formally addressing the assembled clan representatives, rather than Varch directly. "We thank our allies for their honorable intervention and look forward to the Council's review of these events." The withdrawal was strategically sound. They had maintained their honor, while exposing Siraval's willingness to violate sacred traditions. The political ramifications would work in their favor, strengthening their position within the tribal structure. As they made their way back to the base under security escort, Kale's thoughts were already turning to the next steps. The confrontation at the gathering had forced Varch to show his hand publicly, but it had also demonstrated that Clan Siraval was willing to take significant risks to acquire the sisters and their knowledge of the rings. "This won't be their last attempt," he said, as they reached the safety of the base perimeter. "No," Lyra agreed. "But they have lost standing in the tribal council. Their options for legitimate action against us are now severely limited." "Which makes illegitimate actions more likely," Neris pointed out grimly. "We should prepare for direct assault." "Or more subtle approaches," Mira suggested. "Varch isn't stupid. He'll learn from this failure." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "We need a more permanent solution than constantly watching our backs. Something that addresses the root of the problem." "Which is?" Lyra asked. "The imbalance of power," Kale replied. "The rings represent a capability that Clan Siraval and probably others desperately want to control. As long as that's true, you three will be targets." "What are you suggesting?" Neris asked, her expression guarded. "I'm not sure yet," Kale admitted. "But there must be a way to change the equation to make the rings less of a prize worth taking extreme measures for. Or to make them more widely available under appropriate safeguards," Lyra suggested, following his line of thinking. "If the knowledge were shared among all clans with protocols for proper use, the incentive for any one clan to seize control would be reduced." "Exactly," Kale agreed. "A balance of power rather than a secret weapon." "Our mother would not approve," Neris said quietly. "She protected the knowledge because she feared its misuse. And yet she shared it with the three of you," Kale pointed out. "She trusted that together, you would make wise decisions about its use. Perhaps this is the next step in that trust, finding a way to protect the knowledge by carefully sharing it rather than hoarding it." The sisters fell silent, considering this perspective. It represented a significant departure from the secrecy they had maintained following their mother's guidance. But circumstances had changed dramatically since her death, and the events of the gathering had demonstrated the unsustainability of their current position. "We will need time to discuss this," Lyra said finally. "It is not a decision to be made hastily." "Of course," Kale agreed. "But let's not wait too long. Varch will be planning his next move, and I'd rather we weren't just reacting." Over the next week, the sisters engaged in intensive discussions about the future of the ring knowledge. Kale gave them space for these deliberations, understanding the weight of the decision they faced. Meanwhile, he worked with base security to enhance their protective measures and coordinated with their allied clans to maintain vigilance against further Siraval attempts. The tribal council convened an emergency session to address the incident at the gathering. As Kale had anticipated, the public nature of Varch's violation worked against Clan Siraval. The council issued a formal censure, requiring Siraval to pay reparations to House Moreno-Jar and temporarily restricting their participation in tribal affairs. The political victory was satisfying, but temporary. Varch would eventually rebuild his clan's standing, and their underlying motivation remained unchanged. A more fundamental solution was needed. 10 days after the gathering incident, the sisters approached Kale with their decision. They had reached a consensus, though it was clear from their expressions that it had not been an easy process. "We have decided to create a Covenant of the Rings," Lyra announced. "A formal agreement among the clans that would share the knowledge of activation while establishing strict protocols for its use. The Covenant would require all participating clans to swear binding oaths," Neris added. "The rings would be used only for defense of Elthar as a whole, never for advantage in clan disputes. And we'd establish a council of ring-bearers." Mira explained her enthusiasm building as she described their vision. Representatives from each clan who would train together and serve as the guardians of the knowledge. "With House Moreno-Jar as the founders and first teachers," Lyra concluded. "Our unique position, part Eltharian, part human, makes us ideal mediators for this new arrangement." Kale considered the proposal carefully. "It's ambitious," he acknowledged, "and it fundamentally changes the power dynamics on Elthar. How do you think the clans will respond?" "Many will be eager to participate," Lyra predicted. The defensive capabilities of the rings are valuable to all, especially as the climate continues to destabilize. Even Clan Siraval might see the advantage of guaranteed access over uncertain attempts to seize control. And those who refuse to join the Covenant, Kale asked, will find themselves politically isolated, Neris said. The benefits of participation will outweigh the perceived advantage of standing apart. It's a bold plan, Kale said with genuine admiration. And I think it could work. But establishing something of this magnitude will take time and careful diplomacy. Varch may make another move before we can implement it. Which is why we need to begin immediately, Lyra urged. With your support as guardian and house leader. Kale looked at the three women who had so unexpectedly entered his life. In the span of a few weeks, they had transformed from unwanted responsibilities into trusted allies, from strangers into family. The bond between them had evolved from a legal obligation into something deeper and more meaningful, a shared purpose and mutual respect that transcended cultural differences. You have my full support, he declared. House Moreno-Jar will establish the Covenant of the Rings for the benefit of all Elthar. The process of creating the Covenant began with discreet approaches to their strongest allies, House Talari and Clan Vash. The initial reactions were cautious but intrigued. The sisters demonstrated a limited version of the ring's capabilities, enough to convey their value without revealing the complete activation sequence. Kale presented the diplomatic and practical advantages of a shared defense system, emphasizing the benefits to all participants. Gradually, other clans were brought into the discussions. Each new addition to the coalition strengthened their position and created momentum for wider acceptance. Even clans traditionally aligned with Siraval began to express interest, unwilling to be left out of such a significant development. Varch predictably resisted at first. Clan Siraval filed formal objections with the tribal council, claiming that House Moreno-Jar was attempting to coerce other clans through control of ancient technology. But as more clan leaders publicly supported the Covenant concept, his position became increasingly untenable. 3 months after the Gathering incident, a formal ceremony was held to establish the Covenant of the Rings. Representatives from 27 clans, including a reluctant delegation from Siraval, gathered in the Great Plaza to witness the signing of the agreement and the first collective activation of the defensive field. Kale stood proudly with the three sisters as they led the assembled ring-bearers through the initial harmonization process. The energy patterns that formed were more complex and powerful than anything they had previously created, a network of interlocking fields that covered the entire plaza in a shimmering dome of protection. As the field stabilized, Kale felt the now familiar connection to the sisters, but also new presences, the other participants in the Covenant, each contributing their energy and essence to the collective defense. It was a profound experience of unity across cultural boundaries, a shared vulnerability that paradoxically created greater security for all. The formal establishment of the Covenant marked a turning point for both Elthar and House Moreno-Jar. The balance of power among the clans shifted from competition for advantage to cooperation for mutual defense. The sisters transitioned from targets to respected teachers, sharing their knowledge while maintaining their position as the original ring-bearers. And Kale, who had once counted the days until his contract ended, found himself negotiating an extension of his posting. The mining corporation was more than willing to accommodate his request, recognizing the diplomatic advantage of having their engineer serve as the leader of an influential Eltharian house. 6 months after Lord Jar had drunkenly sold his daughters to pay a gambling debt, Kale sat with the sisters in their shared quarters, celebrating the success of the Covenant and the security it had brought them. I never imagined that night in the bar would lead to all this, he admitted, raising a glass of non-Siraval Skivak in a toast. Nor did we, Lyra replied with a smile. When our father transferred the guardianship, we expected at best a reluctant protector, at worst another exploiter. Instead, we found a true guardian. Neris added her usual stoicism, softened by genuine affection. one who stood with us when it mattered most. And created a cool new house with us, Mira chimed in. House Moreno-Jar is the talk of the settlement. Everyone wants to be allied with the founders of the Covenant. Kale laughed, still sometimes amazed by the turn his life had taken. So, what's next for us? The Covenant is established. Clan Siraval has been neutralized as a threat. Your father seems content to let the guardianship stand for now. Where does House Moreno-Jar go from here? The sisters exchanged one of their communicative glances. But this time, Kale could almost sense the meaning behind it, a result of their many shared ring activations, which had gradually deepened the connection between them, even outside the energy field. We were discussing that very question, Lyra said. The mining operations contract with Elthar is up for renewal next year. Many clans are dissatisfied with the current terms. Our house could serve as mediator, Neris suggested, drawing on both your technical knowledge and our diplomatic skills to craft a more equitable agreement. One that benefits both humans and Eltharians, Mira added enthusiastically. A true partnership instead of just resource extraction. A harmony association, Lyra proposed. Built on the foundation we've established with the Covenant. Not just for defense, but for cooperation across all aspects of life on Elthar. Kale considered their vision, seeing its potential to transform not just their lives, but the relationship between humans and Eltharians more broadly. It was an ambitious goal, one that would require years of dedicated effort to realize. Yet he found himself eager to pursue it to build something lasting with these three remarkable women who had become his family. The Harmony Association. He repeated, testing the name. I like it. From reluctant guardian to diplomatic mediator, quite a career change. You adapted well to unexpected circumstances, Neris observed with a rare smile. A valuable quality in an uncertain universe. And you three turned being sold for a drink into the founding of a new era on Elthar, Kale countered. I'd say we all made the best of an unusual situation. They clinked glasses in agreement, the foursome that had begun as strangers, bound by an unwanted obligation, now united by choice and shared purpose. The path ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges, but House Moreno-Jar would face them together stronger for the bonds they had forged through adversity and triumph. As the twin moons of Elthar rose outside their window, casting their pale blue light across the desert landscape, Kale reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. He had come to this harsh world, seeking solitude and simplicity, counting the days until he could leave. Now he couldn't imagine being anywhere else, or with anyone else. Sometimes it seemed the universe had a better plan than the one you made for yourself. And sometimes, being stuck with three gorgeous alien princesses turned out to be exactly where you needed to be.